to happen for maybe your run game to kind of revive itself a bit?
Consistency. It's an interesting thing, and that's probably the biggest issue I see is where we're at consistently. It's funny, you keep things in relative terms. And right now, I think last week we may have averaged 5.9 yards per carry. And you take out the 3 kneel downs and it goes up to 6.5. You take out the 2 sacks, it goes up to 7.5. But there's explosives. And what's happening and what we've talked about is that there have been those incidences where a lot of times it's good defense, and credit KU on that. And sometimes it's not a great call into a particular pressure, whatever the case might be, and that's part of it. And then part of it, we got to do a better job of staying on and finishing. And so I think it's collective responsibility on my part, not only as one calling the plays, but then it's on them for doing their job. And then it's on me of not saying, okay, hey, does this concept confuse with this concept? Hey, this call, we want to leave the ID right here, but then if they do this, then we got to push it, and is there too much confusion, not allowing those guys to play fast? So that's probably the biggest part of it, but relatively speaking right now, it's keep things in perspective as well.
Dylan has had some explosive runs every game. Mm-hmm. Is there sort of a effort to try and get him more touches as we end the season?
Yeah, there's always a plan that we have for him, and sometimes, you got to say, okay, well, you're putting him in. Well, we still have to go through a progression, and we may do our best as an offensive staff to design something to say, hey, it's going to go here, it's going to go there, and then a defensive look changes, maybe this changes, maybe that changes. One thing that we've recognized is everybody knows where he's at on the field when he's on the football field. So every week you've got to try to find ways to get him the ball, but the other guy's pretty good as well. And, this past week we did, as you guys could see, we did have a couple more design quarterback runs in some situations. And, that's real as well. So part of it is, we do need to find the way to get the ball a little bit more.
Houston's 25th in defense. What makes them so good?
Number one, you look at their coaching staff and their head coach. And their head coach, obviously, we competed against here in 2022. I can go back to when I was coaching football at Nebraska Omaha, Division II ranks, and he was at Central Missouri. And one thing that has not changed in 20 years is guys who are physical, guys who are well coached, and guys who run to the football. So you look at them from a scope of a record no different than last week's opponent. And that's right now what the Big 12 is. And you can sit there and say, golly, you look at this defense, and KU, our last opponent, got after him. Well, I think there might have been, was there 4 or 5 turnovers in that particular game that helped them, and credit KU, they made some great plays. But you look at their front seven, they're thick, they're active, they're well coached. They run to the football, they get off blocks, and they present significant challenges for an offense.
Houston, their defensive line, I think under Fritz and their defensive coordinator has run, I think, a lot of the tight fronts that we've seen a little bit more in college football to take away the inside run. Mm-hmm. How does that sort of change your approach when you know a team?
Yeah, they do a good job of going into multiple fronts. They really do, and they'll stem in and out of those multiple fronts. And front or not front, you still need the players in order to play a particular front. And they've got the personnel, and they've got the players and the schemes that do make it a little bit challenging. So, we've got a plan. Just like every single week, we'll have to adjust that plan. Against Colorado, we had to adjust a little bit of a plan. Against West Virginia, we had to adjust a little bit of our plan. And then obviously against KU there towards the latter part of it, there were some adjustments. Some of those adjustments weren't executed extremely well, and that falls directly on my shoulders. But I know that we're going to have to play a little bit of that game because there's too much respect I have for that coaching staff.
The answer is probably absolutely not, because we go one game at a time. But do you peek at the conference standings and say we probably going to win every game the rest of the way?
No, I don't. And because, do I fall victim to humanity? Yeah, I do. I'm guilty, and then what the message is to those players is, as I tell them all the time, a lot of time when I stand in front of them and tell them message of the number one person I'm talking to is me. And I can't, nor anyone in that locker room, control what happens here or what happens there or what we do 3 weeks from now. And what we have to do is control what is right in front of us. And, when it becomes so coaches talk one play at a time, you hear everybody say that, and one game at a time, and this is the most important. That's really what you're talking about, because when you start looking ahead or you start looking at something down the road, that's when you're going to have a bump. And, we've these past 3 weeks and since our last bye game, we've had some challenges. There's been some good football teams, and no record. Those are 3 dang good football teams, and we got another dang good football team that we got to go play on the road. So it is all about controlling what we can control. And this week it's going to be, hey, we got to have a great Thursday today. And then we got to get a good night's rest. A good meal is the same thing I tell guys every week. Get the hydration. The weather's going to be a little bit different than what it is here in Manhattan, Kansas. And then we got to come out tomorrow and have a great Friday, a great walkthrough, and that whole part. And I know that's Coach BS. That's the reality of it. It really is.
Who would you say has emerged as a leader on your offensive line?
It's still Taylor Poitier and Hadley Panzer. Those are kind of the 2 biggest leaders that we've had. I think Taylor's really, and I mention him because he's really becoming more and more vocal, and I think that his play is backing that up. Hadley's always been that leader. He's going out there, he's busting his rear end. Hadley came out of that West Virginia game, and my plan going into the Kansas game was, and you saw Andrew Linegang going for a series there in the first half, and I was planning on getting Hadley probably a couple other series off, and, he kind of told me, he goes, I'm not coming out of this game, and for a Kansas kid, that goes a long way. So those are the guys to me that are a lot of the leaders.